We'll get started soon. Welcome. All right, thanks for being here. Good afternoon from the West Coast. Welcome. We'll get started in 1 minute, so get comfy. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We'll get started in a moment. All right, well, welcome again. My name is Ileana, and I'm a librarian for the San Francisco Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. We are so happy that you're here with us to celebrate Filipino American History Month at the library. Throughout the month of October, learn more about the unique history and contributions of this community through interactive workshops, demonstrations, book readings, and more. Check out the dedicated webpage in the chat to see these events and find great books by Filipino and Filipina authors and illustrators. We are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula and continue to live, work, and play here today. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. Thank you to the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library for their generous support of this entire program series. We couldn't do this without them. And now you are all in for a treat. I would like to introduce our presenters today, up and coming emerging authors and illustrators. First up, we have Brighton Rose, who's a middle grade and young adult fantasy writer specializing in sky pirates and girls who lie. She's an author, mentor, match mentee, say that like 4 times, and a Pitch Wars mentee and occasional doodler. She lives in Central Texas with an electric piano, and I have 43 houseplants, but I hear that number went up, so she can share that if she wants. You're most likely to find her at a cheap taco place or a used bookstore stretching to reach the top shelf. So welcome, Brighton, yay. And her conversational partner today will be Tracy Badua, who's a Filipino-American author of books full of humor, magic, and young people with sunny hearts in a sometimes stormy world. By day, she's an attorney who works in national housing policy and programs. And by night, she squeezes in writing, family time puppets, and bites of her secret candy stash. So everybody ask what that stash is, okay? And she lives in San Diego, California, with her husband, her chatty toddler, and her photogenic Maltese. So welcome, Tracy and Brighton, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, hi, we're excited to be here.
All right, I guess we can go ahead and get started with our conversation. Thank you everybody for joining us for Filipino American History Month. I know it means a lot to me and Brighton as well to have everyone come and join us for some middle grade chat. Brighton, did you want to give everyone an update on your plants just to let them know if the numbers changed?
I'm currently at 49 as of noon today. I'm hanging out with some of my old friends. This is Bernard, he's an aloe. And then I have Philip, the elephant ear plant, and they say hello.
Nice. All right, so just to kind of give everybody a rundown of what we wanted to chat about today, we were trying to think of what would be a good topic that both Brighton and I can kind of talk about, and characters is what we came up with. So I wanted to kind of kick off conversation of just, how did you get started writing, Brighton? Like, when did you write your first book? How old were you? Like, tell us about the characters that you grew up with.
I wrote a book before I actually knew the alphabet. I was 4 years old, and I love how like my dad would show me picture books like as like bedtime stories. So I made one of my own, and I didn't actually know the alphabet, so they were just scribbles. And my first book was about donuts because I really loved donuts at that age. That was an important character in my life. So I wrote a book about donuts scribbles. But as I got older and I actually learned the alphabet and how to put words together, my very first book was actually it was kind of like a fan fiction of my friends. I wrote if me and all my friends were secret agents and we would solve mysteries and like international crimes and all kinds of things like that. And then recently, in the last few years, I've actually been writing novels, and I'm currently working on getting a couple of them published. So I'm very excited for that.
I'm so excited to see what's coming out from your work. I don't know if I drew scribbled up paper. I think we were probably the same in that we just took whatever paper was around, like grabbed it from the printer or grabbed it from wherever, and then tried to like make our own stories out of them. My grandmother has a lot of mine still. I sold some of them to our neighbors because I guess I was that entrepreneurial of like a 5-year-old or whatever. So I do remember writing a lot of stories about my stuffed animals. This was back before I had, as if I have any understanding now, but any understanding of plot and character and whatever. So it would literally just be like, here's a teddy bear going to get a haircut. What haircut should he get? And then that was like the end of the story.
But what haircut did he get?
You had a choice. I drew like 4 different hairstyles that this teddy bear could have. And I actually, now that I think of it, I hope that my grandmother has that locked away somewhere, because I'm curious. Maybe I was a little fashion trendsetter way back when I didn't even know it. But those were my early works, and obviously I've got like my little book cover here over to the side. I do have a middle grade contemporary fantasy novel, Freddy versus the Family Curse. This is he goes through more adventures than just getting a haircut. I can at least promise you that. So that's coming out next year, May 3rd, 2022, from Clarion Books, and I'm excited to tell you all about the different characters in that story, and then just everything that we've been coming up with. One thing I do want to kind of talk about is the fact that, I mentioned Freddy. Freddy is 12, and he is a Filipino-American boy. So it was important to me when I was starting to write novels. And when I say that, I mean, like in the last few years, writing has always been really important to me. I'm such an avid reader. But when I was sitting down to write a story, I wanted to make sure that I had a character that was of a similar background to me, because I didn't really see that too much in the stories that I had accessible to me growing up. I didn't have that many Filipino American characters. I mean, even broadening that, I didn't see many Asian American characters in the media that I consumed. So it was just kind of important for me to have that. And, Freddy versus the Family Curse is not really about, it's not about, how hard it is to be a Filipino American kid or anything like that. It's just about a Filipino American kid who's having a hard time being a kid in general. So I don't know. That's kind of like what I try to do with my stories. How about you, Brighton?
Ooh, I definitely did not see a lot of characters who looked like me growing up, not really in books or movies, and definitely not Filipinos. There are people who looked kind of like me, but they weren't necessarily Filipino. So it was always really important to kind of write the books that someone like me would have wanted to see growing up. So I do have characters that have sort of my background being half Filipino. I have a character who's half Jewish because I am half Jewish. And I think there's a very unique set of experiences that you have when you are of multiple races that I kind of wish I got to know growing up. So that's always been really important for me. But I'm so excited about Freddy. How did you first come up with Freddy?
So this is like a story that's kind of just been in the back of my mind for a few years. I remember going to an event for Filipino American History Month, and so I'm here in San Diego, California, which is Kumeyaay land. So I went to an event here for in October of, maybe it was 2016, 2017. I actually don't remember. And one of the things that they talked about was the Filipino soldiers who fought in World War II. And my grandfather on my dad's side was part of the Philippine Scouts. And it was just one of those things that I didn't know a lot about. And you can kind of tell with how I'm trying to piece things together is that I still don't know a lot about it because it's not something that's really taught to us. Our heritage, our history is not really something that's taught to us in the schools we attend. So a lot of this is pieced together from sitting down in front of my grandma or my aunties and being like, so tell me about this and this and this. So a lot of it is me piecing it together. But I got in my head that I was like, I would really love to write a story where this features in some way. So this is a very, very, very minor spoiler, but there is Freddy does come across an amulet carrying the ghost of his great granduncle, and his great granduncle was a soldier who fought in World War II. So it's kind of a little thing I put in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, do you do the same thing? Do you kind of mine family and friends?
I absolutely do. In some of my books, I do have a character who is half Filipino, and there's some very funny little ways that your heritages might mix in your house. Like my mom, she didn't cook a lot of Filipino food, but every now and then Tagalog words would just end up in our house, and we would just kind of say them. And I use that in my book a lot. Where the character, she sometimes, when she's stressed out, she reverts to Tagalog. And that's something I would notice my mom doing growing up. And unfortunately, she never taught me. I'm learning Tagalog later in life. But I always thought that was just kind of interesting how she reverted back to what was really familiar to her, even though she lived in the States. And I wanted to reflect that in my characters. And I also did do a couple things with my dad's Jewish. So we grew up celebrating both Christmas and Hanukkah. And that was always really cool, where I got to see two different ways of celebrating the holidays. So I really wanted to show that, because I do think that's definitely something that a lot of kids might grow up with, especially children in interfaith families. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool how you get Christmas presents and you get your Hanukkah presents, and you get to learn two very different, very cool stories behind those holidays.
I love that, because it's not an either or thing. There's so many different experiences and so many kinds of families where you can experience all of it, and it's great. Mm-hmm. It's not you have to choose or you have to do X, Y, and Z. So that's really cool, and I'm really glad that's informing the kind of stories you write, because you kind of mentioned it coming from a household both my parents are Filipino, but my daughter growing up she's going to be half Filipino, half Indian, and then my nephew is also half Filipino, half white. We're going to have a lot of different kinds of kids who are going to have all these different kinds of experiences. So the more that we could see just the range of, I don't know, just life out there, I think it's going to be great. Now, I guess what I want to ask you is, your bio mentioned pirates.
Yeah, that was
that
was another book.
Some of your family members are pirates that you drew that experience from.
Oh man, I wish it would be cool if I had ancestors who were pirates that I knew of and could talk to. But that was for a different story, where it was about airships, and there were sky pirates. So not just pirates in the sea, they were in airships flying around, capturing other airships, basically.
That's so cool. I find it I know our conversation is really centering around character, but if we want to talk about like setting and other kind of stuff, I find it's all the admiration out there for folks who write fantasy, like a full-on other world, because I have a hard enough time describing this world. So the fact that you had to come up with like airships and like how do they work and what did they run on, like that's amazing.
Thank you.
All right.
So what was for you, what were some of the hardest parts of developing your characters and really bringing them to life?
Gosh, that's a really good question, because I think you know, I don't know if I'd mentioned this earlier, but I write middle grade and young adults, and one of the challenges is that going in between age ranges, the kinds of stories, is how the main characters would approach things. Like when you think about the way a 10-year-old would approach something versus like a 16-year-old, you know, like it's kind of trying to make sure that whatever story I'm telling is authentic to that. Like if I had, you know, Freddy's 12, so if he needs help with something, he might still go and ask his parents to see if they're going to be able to help him with something. But if he's 16, he's like, no, I'm not gonna ask these guys. So it's like you really have to kind of think about when you were 12, like what was realistic for you to do. And I know that's super specific to people. Like you know, even growing up, like what I was allowed to do as a 12-year-old versus like what one of my cousins like was able to do. Like it's so different. But that was one of the challenges was coming up with characters, is really just trying to make sure that I'm being authentic to the kind of experience that they would have. Because yeah, like we are writing for younger readers who are living it. So for me to rewind however many decades it was, like I have to really do my research. I have to really, really think about it. But I don't know, how about you, like writing for different age ranges? Like what have you found like challenging or interesting about it?
I definitely noticed the mistakes made are kind of different, and the fears that characters have are very different. Let's see. For middle grade, I definitely noticed characters like reaching out more to the adults in their lives, like you said. With young adult, I noticed characters kind of reaching out to their friends more, because it feels like young adult is a little different to me thematically, in that it's a lot about characters finding out how they fit in the wider world, whereas a lot of middle grade, it's sometimes figuring out how they fit within like their own family or within their own town, like that kind of thing. So that's very different to me. And it's also, they have a little bit, young adult characters have a little bit more experience, but both of them still deal with firsts, like first crushes, first days of school, first heartbreaks, even first major life events. So having those in common is also very interesting to me as well.
I love that in the stuff that we're writing, and a lot of other Filipino and Filipino American writers are working on. I love that we're kind of just showing these folks living their best, or you know, worst lives. Like it's not all about, you know, you don't always have to deal with some like super serious issue. You could be fighting ogres or going to space. Like our imaginations and our dreams are just as wide and limitless as everyone else's. So it's really exciting to see. And you know, I know that in a few years we're just going to have a ton of our stories. I know there's on Twitter, there is a movement, Twitter and Instagram, of hashtag fill the shelves, FIL the shelves, and it's highlighting creators of like Filipino creators of like literature. I think it's expanding a little bit to other kind of arts. So I would suggest you guys check that out to see what everybody's up to. It's really cool. It's really nice that we're finding each other and boosting each other. That's really one of the cool things about our writing community, is that we're everyone is really supportive.
And I love that we're showing the wide range of experiences. I think it's important to also show that, there's no universal experience, whether you're Filipino or half Filipino, or Filipino family members. It's very cool to see that you can have all kinds of different stories. You can have all kinds of different heroes, different obstacles people face. So I'm very excited about that.
And it's interesting that you know, we keep coming back to it. We keep circling around the same idea that like all of our experiences are different. And it's even to the point where I may be of the same age of somebody, like another, Filipino American, but maybe they grew up in the Philippines and then moved here. Or, there could be some slight difference in the way they grew up where our stories may not connect at all. Like I don't understand a lick of Tagalog.
I'm learning later in life too.
I'll learn, I swear. Well, it's on my to-do list. It literally is, because my family is actually Ilocano. So I know all these Ilocano words, still can't speak it, but I'm able to, pick up on the stories that they tell, and like when they're scolding people for things. My daughter is like 2.5 and she knows these random like Ilocano words. I was like, where did you learn this?
Oh, that was me growing up. I know random Tagalog.
I love it. And it's like, it's going to be one of those things that's just going to be so cool. Like when she's older, to look back on and be like, all right, like I grew up with this kind of stuff. But talking about the different experiences of it, like she's going to have a different experience as a US born, half Filipino, half Indian kid than I did, who is, also US born, but full Filipino, grew up in a, this and this and this household. So it's just, again, like it's really nice that we are going to be able to show through all of these different stories the breadth of experience that everybody has, and just kind of the nuances involved. I think we're so used to seeing, these characters that are really not one note, but like are, you turn on the TV and there's kind of like a lot of the stereotypes about different characters. And I'm glad we're breaking out of that. Like Freddy is a very, messy Filipino American boy. So he's not gonna fit any of these stereotypes. He's just gonna be a poor cursed kid.
Just trying to get his schoolwork done.
He really is.
Various curses, typical middle grade stuff.
Of course.
Yeah.
there are some experiences that are universal, and trying to survive like 7th and 8th grade.
That's true. That's true.
Oh my goodness.
Speaking of family, how'd you go about rounding out all your supporting characters and putting those together?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about of just even building your characters in general. One of the things that I try to do is really focus on what the character wants to, like, first of all, just what do they want to accomplish? So Freddy obviously doesn't want to be cursed anymore. And so he's literally going to try to find everything that he can do to not be cursed and live as a regular, 7th or 8th grader. So what that does is that forces me as the author to figure out, like, all right, what's his supporting cast going to be? Like, how are they going to help him reach his goal? And how would they like not solve it for him? Because that's also really important. It's like, it's not a lot of fun to read like a story where a kid has an issue and then an adult comes in and it's like, all done, it's all fixed for you, move along. You're like, oh, okay. Like, you want to see this kid do it for himself, like really learn, how to solve the issue, how to really like go over these obstacles himself. So, for example, one of the characters that I have is his cousin Sharky, who is she's everything that he's not. She's super cool. She's like a break dancer. Freddy is cursed, so he's very clumsy. So in my head, I was like, who would be a good sidekick or a good partner in this? Someone who is not clumsy. So I did a break dancer. I don't know how to do any like cool dance moves, so please do not.
I would, but.
And then like, one other character would be, he's cursed, and part of it is him trying to figure out what is the nature of this curse and how do I break it, and thinking about, where would he learn that from? Where in my life have I learned different bits of like folklore and history from? I mentioned it earlier, all the aunties that I would see at parties and just go and sit and ask them about things. So I threw in a great grandmother who would be the person to impart this information to him. But again, because you don't want an adult kind of swooping in and solving everything for him, of course, she's going to have like her, she's got her own priorities. She's got her TV shows she needs to watch. She can't get too involved in his stuff. Like she's got her own life. Like, figure it out, Freddy.
I love that. I love how I kind of do something similar when building out supporting casts, like designing characters specifically to contrast other characters. I think it brings out like a deeper part of that character when you have someone who is very different from them.
Yeah. It's because you also don't want that. Like, if they have the same set of skills, it's just like, then why do you have that other character? And that's actually an issue I had with some like older books that I wrote. It's like I would literally have writing partners be like, I don't know what this person is here for. I was like, I just think they're cool. Just let them be in the story. They're like, you're wasting a lot of time on this one character that's not really adding things. Like, oh, fine.
And I love Freddy and Sharpie's dynamic. And how they're very different people, but they are in the same family, and they are like, they're still both heroes in two very different ways. And I love how they play off each other.
Oh, thanks. It's one of the things that I did kind of want to feature in this was the fact that, so in the story, they're cousins. Mm-hmm. And I grew up very close to my cousins. We used to live fairly close to each other, see each other all the time. So it was important to me to kind of highlight that kind of relationship where, like, when when I grew up, a lot of like my cousins were my friends. And that's one of the things that I realized later on in life is not true of a lot of different families. So it's one of the things that I kind of wanted to highlight.
I love that. I love reading it because I'm the opposite. Like, my immediate family were the only branch of our family tree that lived where I grew up. So I didn't really have a lot of cousins around. I had a lot of friends, but it was really cool. I love reading books with very close extended family relationships because it feels like I'm getting a peek into a whole other world. It's so neat. Yeah.
We're back here in San Diego, so we're close to a lot of family now, and it's been great because I not only get to see everybody again, but there's so many little Easter eggs in Freddy that come from the story. Like, oh gosh, they're gonna hate me when they read this. This is not about them, but there's little bits and pieces about in the stories where, like, I have drawn from like something that I heard from, so-and-so's uncle did this, and so-and-so, it's like, it's the more kind of people you bring into your sphere, the more you can kind of figure out like what makes for an interesting story, like what makes people more well-rounded. Now, that's not to say like you should just go take someone's story and run with it and just like write all of it down, but just to take inspiration from something.
This is such a great conversation. We're getting some questions in, and I wanted to see if you wanted to do some dance moves first. No. No, not at all. But it would be a great time. I think the character conversation has been fantastic. The world building, I'm like, what? Like that, it was kind of an added perk. And just to kind of show off some skills that you have now, I think would be a good time as we get into some Q&A eventually.
Awesome. Yeah. So what we want, Brighton, if you wanted to pull up your screen, what we wanted to kind of do with everybody today is create our own main characters. Brighton and I were talking about how we go about creating our characters and how we shape the supporting cast. So one of the things that we thought would be cool to do with everybody is, just brainstorm, like, if we wanted to create a story today, who would our main character be? So, we'll kind of start off with a few things of just like, let's think of a person, a place, a goal. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. And I think library folks, is there a way for people to, raise their hands or unmute their mics? Is there a way to have them participate in that way?
They can raise their hands, and then we can, if they're in Zoom, and then we can unmute their mics for them, or they can add it in the chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. I am smiling because I'm seeing some encouragement about dancing, and I'm not going to do it.
My mom's actually a pretty solid dancer. That's not one of her talents I inherited, sadly.
Maybe that could be the start of our main character right now. Maybe we can have a middle grade character
I love that.
Is a good dancer. So we're basically going into the realm of fantasy for me, because that is definitely not me.
Good dancer.
All right.
There we go. So by the way, I am drawing on my iPad for you all to see. That's what you'll see on this screen here. So as we go to create a character, I love thinking of what is the problem this character is trying to solve. There's like two things I think of first. The first is like some really distinguishing characteristic, like in this case, good dancer. And the second is problem they're trying to solve. So if they're a good dancer, what's a problem that a good dancer might have?
I'm going to peek into the chat and see if we can get any participation from folks. Oh, I see something from Rush. Sprained ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's tough.
That would be an interesting character arc if someone's been a good dancer for so long and they sprain an ankle, and so much of their identity has been tied to dancing. They'll have to grapple with, okay, who am I now if I can't dance for a little bit?
Yeah, and that's, one of the things I was talking about earlier is the fact that you really don't want like an adult character swooping in and fixing everything. And even if you had some like fantastic doctor, they're not going to come and be like, now your sprained ankles is all fixed, you're back to being a star dancer. You're going to have to sit and deal with it and heal. Oh, this poor dancer character.
Definitely.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to grab a pen of my own so I can jot down some notes. So we've got a dancer with a sprained ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, their goal would probably be to get right back out there. Maybe they would really want to, go back to competing. Maybe they're on a team and the team is counting on them. Or maybe there's some big competition where there's a cash prize and they want to get it for some reason.
Ooh, that would be an excellent source of tension.
Ooh.
Yeah, you're the star of your team and then you're out. What do you do?
Ooh, like I've already stressed out thinking about this poor 12-year-old. I'm in my head, I'm thinking 12, but it could be, any range for middle grade. But I'm already stressed out thinking about this poor character. Okay, so we've got a dancer. Oh my gosh, you've already started drawing. I love it. Ooh.
There was another perfectionism.
That actually ties it. We could tie that into the sprained ankle because you cannot dance the same way, perhaps. Like maybe the routine isn't something that you can do if you've got a sprained ankle. And maybe you hate that. Maybe you hate that you're not able to, do everything you could like last week. And I'm reading the comments again of the High School Musical dilemma of another hobby versus the group's judgment. That's a
Ooh, yeah, I remember that. They have a dancer in that movie and she's like on the math team, but she's secretly a dancer and she was worried about the math team judging her. I also thought it was so funny because all my friends were on the math team in high school and they would have probably thought it'd be really cool if I danced.
I like it. Oh, this is really cool because, as we're developing this main character together, you can already kind of see this inner kind of turmoil that's happening of they're not, they want to help their team or they want to do something, but they've got this sprained ankle, but maybe this sprained ankle is going to give them a chance to pursue something that they love instead.
Ooh, yeah, something they did not expect.
Like your math club.
Yeah, math club. There you go. Sometimes things you love most creep up on you, whether it's like hobbies or people, and you all of a sudden you're like, wait, I actually am kind of into that. Huh.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. And I love the way that you're so quickly drawing this. I am so glad that there's no way for you to see the notes and pen movements that I'm doing because it's literally just chicken scratch and just drawing everywhere. So.
So let's give him a couple attributes here. What kind of hair can we give this character?
Ooh. Let's see if we can get some.
Short, long, curly, straight.
Bald. Ooh,
all right.
A ball dancer. I love it.
Oof, I'm not used to.
I love it. I love that they just threw a challenge at you.
There we go. Bald
Very cool.
Or pigtails. I'm gonna do bald because I don't think I've written a bald in a while. There we go. Let's see. If they're a dancer, how would they dress? I'm not super familiar with.
I mean, let's think about it, because I'm seeing in the comments, if this is a speculative setting, for example, like what if they're in like a magic school, or what if they're in like a Western, like maybe it's line dancing or something, like we have to, aside from the character, you kind of have to pull back and think like, who would they, where are they? Are they in a big city, small town, in the woods? So give us some settings. Our folks in the chat. Because just, with Freddy, it's contemporary, so it kind of occurs in like the suburbs of San Diego. So it was really easy for me to imagine what he would be wearing and what he'd be doing. But if it was like the 1980s, like, oh my gosh, maybe what he'd be wearing is something different. Like, how would I do that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And also climate is part of it too. Like growing up in North Georgia, I dressed very differently from my cousins who were from New York.
Nice.
Ooh, chainmail. Right. I love chainmail, but I've drawn it before and it takes a couple hours, so I don't think we'll do it. But I like the pizzazz.
I like it. We're like 3 hours later, we've done one shirt. I love it. And, we are throwing so many different ideas about there of just like ways that you could take this really simple idea of a character who is a dancer and has a sprained ankle and just throw it into all these different scenarios. So, chainmail, like, what if this was in medieval times and there was like some sort of festival, or not a ball, I guess that would be like Renaissance era, but what if there was some sort of thing that they had to be prepared for and that they couldn't do it? Maybe like the king would get angry at them if they weren't able to perform.
Up the stakes.
Embroidery? Okay. Oh, I love it.
Little embroidered flowers.
I like it because we've got this like definitely kind of edgy, cool character going. And thank you, Ryan. We also love the flowers. I'm just blown away by how quickly you're doing all of this. And one thing I want to ask is, folks in the audience or folks who are drawing this or following along later on YouTube, I know Brighton and I would really like to see the main characters that you guys come up with. So if you wanted to do your own exercise and brainstorm the same way we're doing, and then throw it up online or get your parents' permission to send it to us, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to see what people come up with. And I love how you can go all kinds of different directions just by changing one small detail. So for example, if we're doing a middle grade character, imagine how different your character could be if you just aged them up to YA. Or if you, instead of dancing, you had some other thing they're really competitive about. That would completely change them too. There's so many, like, it amazes me how many like little details you can change to completely alter the course of a story.
Right, because and even if we keep that same thing of sprained ankle, you could change this to they are the star of their basketball team. They're, and same thing where like they could worry about letting down their teammates or doing something like that. So it completely changes the story depending on how, like on what you're shaping kind of the main character and their interests to be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a nice dress. I love it.
Trying to remember how to draw a crutch.
Oh.
It goes down like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you have that part, and then they have like there's a bar they hang on to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right, so that'll be.
So this is kind of like I know we're getting toward the near end of our time, so we'll probably take some questions while you're finishing up the drawing. But one thing I wanted to give a little bit of a sneak peek to is in Freddy, there is a little bit of a muscle sprain, a little bit of an ankle injury that happens at some point. And I pulled some inspiration from real life of a home remedy that my grandmother did, where she wrapped the muscle sprain in ginger, because
oh my gosh, we did.
and it was one of this, like, I remember it was my brother that had gotten hurt, and I remember watching my grandmother doing this, and just like my parents, like, you know, watching and helping, because this was medicine that they knew, and it was so cool. So I threw some bits of that into the story.
We just did Vicks in my house, Vicks Vapor Rub. Everything.
You know, it's actually one of the things that my dad gave us for my daughter. He was like, when she was, you know, baby, and she was sniffly or something. My dad was like, here, like, passed down from the ages. It was like a little thing of Vicks. It's like, oh, it's come full circle.
Wow, it is really hard to draw on iPads left-handed.
Wow.
This is amazing. We do have some questions that have come in. So I think now would be a good time for that.
Okay.
One question is, what are your thoughts on villains? And what are some from media or other sources that inspire yours in your own stories?
Brighton, you want to tackle this one? Because you made a noise that made it sound like
I love villains. My favorite kind of villain is a villain that is similar enough to the main character that they could be the main character in a different set of circumstances. I think that is fascinating. It almost forces the main character to examine themselves a little bit more closely, because if they went down a different path, they could be as bad as the bad guy. And I've always been so fascinated by how important the choices you make end up being. So love villains for that. And I love villains that are like horrible but have a very distinctive sense of style. Like, I love Cruella de Vil. I haven't seen the new movie yet. I'm going to. It's on my list. But all she wants to do is like make fur fashion out of puppies, which is such a strange thing, but that's her thing. And if you see a picture of her, if you see anyone dressed up as her, you know it's her, because her stylization is so distinct with the really dramatic makeup and like the big furs. And that, I think, is making of a good villain, is no matter who's dressing up as them, is referencing them, you know it's that villain. So love that. And then what was the other question?
What do they inspire yours in your own stories?
I definitely have a character who's a villain and very, very fashionable. She doesn't want to like skin puppies. She's actually just a vampire, but she has a very distinctive sense of style. How about you, Tracy? Who are your favorite villains, and how do you create villains?
This one's harder for me, because technically, you know, in Freddy, there is no like big villain. There are spirits and shadows, but I think in my head, he lives in a world where there really isn't one or two people just like out to get him. He's just like, things ended up in a way that negatively affect him, and he has to work his way out of it. So I don't have as much of a strong villain. And I actually, you know, as you were talking about like fashion and flashy villains, I saw that Ryan in the comments was like, yeah, anime villains are kind of in that thing too. Yeah, there are some really good villains in anime.
I love that you don't have like a true main antagonist, though. Like, that's very, very true to life. And I think it's maybe very comforting for young readers to see that sometimes there aren't major bad guys you can fight.
Yeah, thanks. Because sometimes there aren't. And you just kind of have to find your way through the mess on your own.
One question that we like to ask our authors and emerging authors is, what would complement your books or your creations? So is there something else out there that would, by another author or illustrator, that you feel like would complement, or that you'd be like, yes, read this and read this? They would work really well together. Yeah.
what's funny is my first thought was like, oh, pairings, like with food, like go get Filipino food and read my book.
I was going to say that.
Which is, I don't think that's what you were going for.
Well, that works too. That works too.
Is go get yourself some Filipino takeout, go get an auntie to cook for you, like Freddy versus a family curse.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
But I know, thinking about like Freddy is intended, even though it's about like a curse and spirits, it's really intended to be like a lighthearted, fun story with elements of Filipino folklore. So off the top of my head, a few things that I can think about in terms of just humor and fun is Stand Up Yumi Chung by Jessica Kim. And then with that contemporary fantasy spin, The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez, or even Ghost Squad.
Love that book so much. Oh my gosh.
I love all of these books. I'm like really actually very nervous about comping them because I love them so much.
Nestor is such a great book. I listened to it on audiobook as I was driving, and what I would do is I would just sit in like the parking lot of the grocery store just listening and laughing. So imagine like someone walks by and I'm just cracking up alone in my car, and it's just because I have like Nestor Lopez playing.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. I think comps for mine. The one that I'm working on right now with the half Filipino and half Jewish main characters, I would actually, it's a little older, but there's a movie called Booksmart that's kind of similar to them. And it's like if the characters from Booksmart, it's about these two high school girls who have been like straight-laced their whole lives, and they deal with like situations that they're not used to. And that's something my characters go through a lot. And then for my middle grade book that I'm working on, I would say old fairy tales and like spoofs of fairy tales and like books that pay homage to old fairy tales, like Ella Enchanted, the Discworld series, any book that like is sort of an affectionate parody of fairy tales, because I love unpacking things that have been done in the past, like doing a new spin on them. And my middle grade book is about the sister of a chosen one. Like, you know how in stories the chosen one's going to save the world? This book is about.
I love that.
Yeah. This book's about his sister, and she has to deal with all the nonsense that comes with having a brother who's going to save the world.
Oh.
That's fantastic. We can't wait. We're at the end of our time, and this has been so much fun. I feel like I've learned a lot, and it's been fantastic to watch this character come to life and just what you both bring to your stories. And
we never named the character. Hang on. We need a name.
In the chat, throw us a name.
We have to name the character. Chandelier.
I love that. Chandelier is an amazing name for an aspiring dancer.
Chandelier Mariah. We have, yes.
Wait, how do you
Mariah
spell
Chandelier? Yes.
Yeah, you got it.
Let's take care of that.
Yes, thank you. Business. But anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we finish?
Pre-order Freddy versus Family Curse. It's great. Do it. It's funny. Can vouch.
Thank you, Brighton. I will echo that. Please order Freddy versus the Family Curse. It's from Claire on Books. It's out May 3rd, 2022. So just in time for Asian American Heritage Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So May 3rd.
I'm so excited. The book is really funny.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you both for your time and your energy and your knowledge and your lived experience, bringing this program to our families and our adults and our youth and our educators who are watching as well. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you love today's program, check out our calendar. There are more opportunities to engage in cultural programs just like this one to celebrate Filipino American History Month. So be sure to check out the links in the chat. Take good care of yourselves. Please stay safe. And we hope to see you all at another library program soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Paalam. Mahal kita.